You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis. I'm host of BioTalk, and as you know, we like to interview global leaders who have a presence here in the BioHealth Capital Region, which is Virginia, D.C., and Maryland. Today, we have the Vice President and Head, GSK Global Vaccines, U.S. R&D Center, Rip Ballou, with us.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, Rip. Welcome to the show. And can you recite back your title to me?
I'm a Vice President, and I'm head of the U.S. R&D Center, which is one of 3 R&D centers globally that GSK Vaccines, a division of GSK, has established, one here, one in Belgium, and one in Siena, Italy.
Great, and we're going to drill down on that further as we talk, but thank you for that intro. A lot of people don't know of you in this region yet because you've only been here how long now?
We opened the doors in August of 2015,
right,
and spent about a year and a half of sort of renovation and staffing up. And by the end of 2017, we were pretty much at full staff at around 500 employees.
That's fantastic because everybody wondered what was going to happen to this building. And,
sure.
And GSK is doing what it was created to do. But let's talk to the audience about what your background is, Rip, and how you actually got to GSK and how your career has evolved to where it is, to where you're running this major U.S. division.
So I'm trained as an infectious disease physician. I went to Emory University for my School of Medicine, and then immediately came into the Army under an Army scholarship. Spent literally the next 20 years at Walter Reed completing my medical and infectious disease training, and then transferred to the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, which was focusing primarily on infectious disease threats to soldiers. And I became very interested in malaria and ended up working on the Army's malaria vaccine program. And at that time, they partnered with the company that ultimately became GSK. Then it was SmithKline & French, based in Philadelphia. And one way or another, I stayed involved in a collaboration with that group all the way through my military career. When I retired in 1999, I went to MedImmune. I spent 3 years there, and then was recruited to go to GSK in Belgium and work again on the malaria vaccine program that I had been working on in the Army. So I have been with GSK between 2003 and now, except for a period of about 1.5 years from essentially 2008 to 2010, when I went to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and worked on their internal vaccines programs. Again, keeping an eye on what was going on with the malaria vaccine. When I went back to Belgium after the Gates Foundation, I was asked to head up an early development group that we referred to as Clinical Research and Translational Science. And then in 2015, really end of 2014, at the same time that we were in deep discussions around the acquisition of Novartis vaccines, and beginning to think, what would R&D organization look like after that, was asked to come and set up an R&D center in the U.S.
It's actually coming back home again then, right?
It is, in a way.
And what do you think about this as a place for raise a family, grow a family, and, I guess you were enthused to come back into the region again? Sure.
Montgomery County is really, it's got great schools. The quality of living is good here. The only thing you can complain about really is the weather in the summer, which can be a little over.
Which we're there now, a little humidity today.
Yeah. But otherwise, the transportation system is great. The part of the county that I'm working and living in now was really the countryside when I lived here before. So I've seen big changes over the last decade, but in many ways it was coming home again. And it's great to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you and everything that you're doing to help grow the county, too. For the listeners who don't know anything about GlaxoSmithKline, before we dive deep into the vaccine division, can you give a broad overview of the parent company and what they're doing globally?
So GSK as a corporate entity has 3 divisions, a pharma, a consumer health, and a vaccines group. And each of those are, of course, very different businesses, but we are one company that lives by a common set of values, a common mission, and, of course, different ways of implementing that. The vaccines division is based in Belgium. That's where the core of our manufacturing facilities, although we have a global footprint, most of the manufacturing facilities are in Belgium, where historically GSK Vaccines was based prior to the acquisition of Novartis vaccines. The program has, the R&D program there has primarily, and I'm talking about historically now, focused on first vaccines that would be important globally. And we did not pay a lot of attention to the U.S. market. Now, we have 41 licensed vaccines around the world, 17 here in the U.S. So we are a company with an incredible breadth of products that are on the market. This, of course, requires a massive infrastructure in terms of manufacturing and supply and a global organization to deliver those vaccines. But over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been recognized that for us to continue to be really successful and be able to do what we want to do in vaccines, which is to be able to provide solutions globally, we have to be able to do well in the United States. And that tangible output of that is that we've established an end-to-end R&D center here in Rockville to specifically focus on products that, while they will be global in scope, they must succeed in the United States. And therefore, we wanted to be closer to the market, to understand the needs, to be close to our partners, many of whom are either academic or government laboratories, close to the FDA, all the reasons why this industry, I think, sees value in Montgomery County and the infrastructure that's established here.
So you answered part of what I was going to ask you next, is why Rockville. But the question is, how difficult was the selection process to identify one center in, I think it's North America, really? You serve the whole North America, not just the United States, right? So was that a difficult process to go through to narrow it down and make the final decision in Rockville?
I don't think it was that hard of a decision. And I say that because, first of all, we had a long-term lease on this facility, and that meant that we weren't looking for turf. There was a place to go. It was essentially in mothballs and waiting to be occupied. But more importantly, between us and Novartis vaccines, there were at least 5 laboratory sites scattered throughout the United States and in Canada that were doing bits and pieces of R&D. And we really felt that co-localization and a true end-to-end capacity for R&D activities was a much better approach than we were doing. We got into that situation because of legacy organizations. As we made acquisitions or as things happened, laboratories were in various places, and none of them had the ability really to drive a development program end to end. So I think that the idea of consolidation was easy, and the fact that we had a facility in Washington, D.C., and I think the other alternatives may have been the Boston area or the West Coast, but I think this is the one that made sense to GSK.
And one of the things that we try to promote here in Montgomery County is that it's the only place in the United States that has the FDA and NIH with 6,000 scientists and 27 research institutes. Now, is that overblown when we state that to a company like yours? I mean, do you see that as a significant advantage where your regulatory and your scientists can jump in a car, go talk to the regulatory officials or talk to scientists at NIH?
It's very real. It was a very meaningful piece of the decision to locate here. Historically, GSK has had a lot of collaborations with NIH, and since we've been here, we've established more. With the number of products that we have on the market, we're talking to the FDA all the time. We have a fairly significant global regulatory affairs unit with a U.S. component, and they're based here. And yes, the proximity is very important.
And does your division, or is it another division that would interact with CMS in Baltimore if you're looking for pricing one of your vaccines?
That's largely done through our group that's in the Navy Yard in Philadelphia. So our commercial, our global medical affairs group that's U.S. focused, the commercial team that's U.S. focused, the vaccines business side is primarily located in the Navy Yard in Philadelphia, with some pieces of it in RTP.
Well, I guess it's just a matter of time we can attract them all of them down here?
Yeah, it would be great to have them. We have the space.
Yeah, hey, you could put them right in this building. Great. When we talk about you have 41 licensed vaccines, how is the research going and your pipeline to add to that? And are you also looking at strategic acquisitions and joint ventures to complement what you already have in your pipeline?
Well, there are 14 development programs that, and by that I mean vaccines that are either in late preclinical or in the clinic that are being prosecuted today by GSK. Not all of them here, of course.
Right.
We have 2 other R&D centers. But to sustain a pipeline, you have to have a lot of shots on goal. Right. And not all of these programs are likely to succeed, but we think it's important to be in a number of different areas of research. We have made major investments in the past around some core technologies that enable us to have a really broad reach into development opportunities. And I think a great example of this is 25 years ago, we began making a major investment in adjuvants. That was a pure R&D story for a number of years. We actually were able to show the first real proof of concept that these adjuvants could fundamentally change the ability of a vaccine to protect or not was the work that I did with GSK on malaria when I was at Walter Reed, where we showed that the AS01 adjuvant was absolutely critical to making a malaria vaccine that would either protect or not. And now, fast forward, in 2017, we licensed Shingrix, the shingles vaccine that uses that AS01 adjuvant. If we had not been able to do this work in the malaria context, the Shingrix would probably not have been possible. So this is, and we're now using that adjuvant in a number of our development programs where we think an adjuvant is necessary. So that's our strategy for investing in many ways is based upon these platform capabilities. One of the decisions that we looked at very carefully when we acquired Novartis was their access to some very empowering platforms. The group in Siena has developed this vaccine Bexsero for meningococcal B, which uses a very different approach to vaccine development called reverse vaccinology. And it has some real deep capabilities in using genomic information to design vaccines. The group in Cambridge had a self-amplifying messenger RNA, which we think holds incredible promise for revolutionizing how we develop and make vaccines for the future. So we've made similar investments there, and we have acquired biotechs who have platform capabilities. The 2 that I'll mention was a company called Okairos that had developed a chimpanzee adenovirus platform, again, a genetic vaccine using an attenuated viral vector that allows you to essentially plug and play with different antigens, and a Swiss company that was called Glycovaxin that has a very revolutionary way of making glycoconjugates in E. coli. So essentially eliminating, getting away from the chemistry involved in making glycoconjugates and very much simplifying the manufacturing process. And that's the kind of, when we talk about acquisitions, we are looking for those kinds of capabilities that are going to be game changers for us. And that's typically what we're looking at.
And when you look at those things that would be additive to your pipeline, do you have business development people here in Rockville that can go out and do some of that searching that for additional partners or acquisitions, or is that concentrate in another area?
Well, since the vaccine's headquarters is in Belgium, the business development team is based there, but we have BD folks here locally in the building.
As well.
Yes, and they work very closely with us. And if in the process of developing a vaccine we run into a technological barrier that we think needs another solution, they're on top of it, and they're working to see what we can do.
Sounds like it's working. I'm speaking with Rich Ballou, who's the VP and head of the GSK Global Vaccine U.S. R&D Center here in Rockville. And Rip, one of the things you talked about when we started was you have a government background with Walter Reed, NGO with the Gates Foundation, industry, MedImmune, GSK, and also medicine. I mean, you have a very unique background for a global leader and head. within this industry. So tell me how you feel that's been an advantage to you to lead what you're doing today.
Well, certainly the medical and infectious disease background has, I was close to the patient for a long time before I got into a long time, 8 years, before I got into R&D. And I think that particularly in the area of infectious diseases, I understand the diseases that we're going after. And certainly that's helped me in terms of thinking about trial design and target populations.
From a patient perspective.
From the patient's perspective.
Right.
The work in the government was great because it was, in a way, like a very well-funded biotech, in the sense that they gave us big missions, a reasonable budget, and said, go out and figure out how to do this. Right. And find partners, push the envelope. And I think that was, and we did it. I mean, and we were able to do things a lot faster in the government, frankly, at least at that time, than we could do in industry today.
Like getting checks out of Belgium.
Yeah, perhaps. So I think that learning how to work as a collaborator with industry, learning how industry approaches things from the government side was a great place to be introduced into this field of product development. Coming to industry, of course, was another education because things are a little more buttoned down and there, of course, every industry has its own culture. I was fortunate enough to be at MedImmune at a time when Wayne Hochmeyer was still there, and since he had been my boss at Walter Reed, it was fun. It was
an easy transition.
It was fun to come and work with him under that situation, and then going to GSK as an employee, again working on products that I had been involved with was also very satisfying. And then to see that malaria vaccine actually get launched and rolled out in a large phase 3, get an approval in Europe, and now we're in pilot introduction. So I've had the real pleasure of seeing a product develop from concept to actually application. And there's not a lot of people that have that in their career.
Your background's so unique that I think that everything you've done has contributed to the next step in where you have progressed to today.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So let's talk about this BioHealth Capital Region. Has it met all of your expectations? And if there's an area that you feel you'd like to see some improvement or gaps that still need to be filled here to help fully support what your goals are in the future, what would it be?
Well, I think the thing that it has done that's very tangible for us is that you've given us an opportunity to make ourselves known. You've given us, GSK has credibility, but you were kind enough very early on to give me a platform to come and introduce an organization that was virtual at the time. And when it came time to build staff, and literally half of these 500 people that we've hired here came locally. These are local hires that have come out of academia, out of the government, out of NIH, out of other biotechs. So this has been, I think, an environment that has allowed us to staff up. And I'll tell you, when I told people that we would be staffed up by the end of 2017, the people in Belgium didn't believe me. They really thought it was going to take much longer to get staffed up. So we really pushed our HR department, I can tell you, to do this. And I've been really pleasantly surprised at the quality of employees that we've been able to hire locally. So I think that you're obviously doing something right by having an environment that attracts smart people that want to get into product development, and we've been able to do that. Where I think I have not been able to capitalize on as much, and I think primarily it's because during this building process, I've had to be pretty internally focused on making sure that we were here and set up and things were working right. I have not had the opportunity to do as much of the external engagement in the community as I would like to. And I think that going forward, that's something we can definitely have some more discussions about.
Well, we will definitely follow up on that. We'll give you all the opportunities you'd like based on what your schedule would permit to do that, Rip. And I think with the experience you've had and demonstrating over the last 3 years how you can go from 0 to 500 people, that's a success story that anybody that was thinking about a location to come into, this is a success story that we would love to promote more. Yeah, definitely. So tell us a little bit more about your future goals for this division and both locally and globally.
Well, the first thing is that we want to deliver on the commitment that we've made in establishing a facility here, which is to develop new products that have been assigned to this unit. And I'm really happy to say that despite all of the issues of the growing pains that you have when you set up a new organization, we've not missed a beat on any of the key milestones on those projects, which has been fantastic. It's a real kudos to my team working under sometimes not easy situation as we were trying to get labs set up and while we were still doing renovations. But things are moving along well. We want to definitely prosecute those development programs. One of the commercial products that is based here is the shingles vaccine, and we have a big team working on the post-marketing commitments and phase 4 activities, and these are key in making that asset really deliver on its full potential, expanding indications, figuring out where else we can find an appropriate medical solution for people that are at risk for shingles. And those need to be data-based. And, of course, those will be done through clinical studies that the teams here will drive. We're also very fortunate to have the commercial lead for our meningitis portfolio based here. These are really important assets. Menveo, which is our quadrivalent ACWY conjugate vaccine, and Bexsero, which is the meningitis B, as a combination of, when used together, really provide a broad solution to the risk of meningitis. These are very important assets for the company, and it's great that we have the commercial team here and driving, again, the life cycle management of that important asset.
Sounds like you're going to be busy for a few years.
Yeah. And, I know we've talked about this, but I have been working with BARDA and others around how can GSK bring some of its particular assets to biopreparedness. And one of my real ambitions is in fact to establish a component of the facility here which is really focusing on this. And we're working with CEPI, we're working with BARDA, working with some other potential funders to see how we might be able to do that.
Yeah, and when you talk about BARDA, we had the opportunity to try to get a proposal for a Carabex Accelerator related to BARDA. Unfortunately, we didn't win this time, but they said they'd like to work with us in January because they saw that we had a great deal of strength in working with early stage companies here, and they wanted to work more with mature companies. But they said there's a uniqueness in this region, which you would think that they would have seen that in Boston or San Francisco, but they think that we have a great strength of working with early stage companies that would be in that field. So we'll come back to you and say, how can we work together to help you establish your goal, which would also be good for all of us. And as we look at closing here, what can people in the region do to support you even more in the future to make certain your growth is accelerated and maintained at the pace that you're at today?
I think what you alluded to at the beginning is that the fact that other companies are putting roots down in this area only enhances the credibility of Montgomery County and this region as a place where we can really do successful product development. So I think what helps this community helps us. It's going to attract better suppliers. It's going to provide a more compelling case for people who want to put service companies in the area. And I think that those are all things that if we can all count on good infrastructure, good service, the proper relationships with Montgomery County, it's a highly regulated environment. I think all of that helps us. So that's really great.
We'll try to keep them coming. So in closing, we have an open mic now. Anything you'd like to talk to our listeners about that we didn't cover that's on your mind personally or corporately?
No, I just tell people that we have remaining positions that are open at the facility. Our website has an easy-to-find link to jobs. We are actually now at the point where we are starting to see some turnover. People move on with their lives, so there are always a few openings here, and we're always looking for good talent. Check us out.
Yeah, just let us know what those we have a jobs board on the BioHealth Innovation newsletter, and if you can have your human resource people contact us, we can post those on our website too. So we'll see if we can work more collaboratively on helping you find some new people. I've been with Rich Ballou, the Vice President Head, GSK Global Vaccines U.S. R&D Center here in Rockville, Montgomery County, Maryland. been a fantastic interview. I think it's been very educational, and it's nice to talk about positive things when you're talking about this industry with someone who's helping grow the region as well as growing their own company. So, Rip, thank you very much for being on BioTalk.
Rich, thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.